Hi, I'm Alison Bentley. I lead the genetics and breeding team at NIAB, and today we're going to tell you a little bit about our work on wheat. And we work on wheat because it's a really important crop. It feeds a lot of people, both here in the UK and also around the world. And wheat is a really complex crop. When you walk through a field like this, you may not think so, but we're going to tell you a little bit about why it's complicated and why we need to spend time doing research and breeding to better adapt wheat to changing climates. One of the things we're really interested in is understanding more about flowering time. And flowering time is the reproductive stage of wheat, and it's really important when we think about yield. And it's the point where the plant goes from being vegetative and accumulating photosynthetic products into producing the grain that we rely on as a foodstuff and a material to make other products with. And you can see there's a really big range of flowering time in wheat. So in front of me is some spring wheat. Now, this spring wheat was planted here in March and is very small still and still a while away from yield development compared to this winter wheat varieties which were planted in the autumn and are now coming into ear. And this is the point that we're really interested in because this is when the plant's starting to produce the final harvested yield. Most of the wheat that's grown in the UK is winter wheat, so wheat that's sown in the autumn and harvested at the end of the summer. And because it has to grow over quite a long period of time, it has a late flowering time. But one of the things we've been interested in recently is there a potential for early flowering varieties in the UK? As the summers become hotter and drier, potentially earlier flowering varieties could help adapt wheat to shorter seasons. So we've been talking to agronomists working with farmers throughout the UK to really understand, is there an opportunity or are there many risks associated with early flowering? Next we're going to hear from Hester Sheehan, who ran the recent agronomist consultation to find out more about farmers' demands for and the opportunities and risks associated with earlier flowering winter wheat varieties.
I'm a postdoc at the Department of Plant Sciences and currently doing a postdoc placement at NIAB. And so climate change is a major problem for all of us in the world, including plants that produce the food that we eat. And in the UK, climate change is predicted to lead to a 50% occurrence of hot summers, such as the one that we experienced in 2018, by mid-century, as well as an increase in the prevalence and severity of droughts. And so this is really important for plants. This can lead to increased risks of heat stress and drought stress. And for wheat, this can really impact on the yield, so the amount of grain that's produced at the end of the season. This is a really important problem because so much of our diet comes from wheat-based products. Okay, so one strategy to enable wheat to avoid the effects of drought stress would be to have it flower earlier in the season so that the grainful period, when the grain is growing, can be completed before the effects of low water availability are felt. And this is a strategy employed in the hotter, more southern areas of Europe. But in the UK, there are very few early flowering varieties of wheat adapted to the UK growing conditions. And so we wanted to talk to UK agronomists to gauge their opinion on early flowering varieties and the prospect for their use in the UK. And so the agronomists that we talked to said that the farmers or wheat farmers in their regions were already experiencing the effects of drought stress and potential yield loss, particularly in certain areas and on certain soils. And so they saw the employment of early flowering varieties as a good strategy to mitigate the effects of these stresses, and particularly looking forward into the future with climate change. Another major benefit that they saw was with regards to farm management. So farming is becoming a lot more compact with a lot of pressure placed on machinery and labour at key cropping activities such as drilling and harvesting. And employing varieties that have different developmental staging, such as different flowering times, would enable you to spread some of this pressure across the farm and across timings. So for instance, with wheat, grain could be harvested at the appropriate time when it's at its peak quality. So overall, we had a really positive impression from these agronomists about the future of early flowering varieties in the UK. And in order to breed early flowering varieties, we need to have an understanding of the genetic controllers of flowering time. And this is an active area of research at NIAB. And this research will be fed into breeding programs with the idea of creating early breeding varieties by the end of this decade.
It's really important to adapting wheat to the environment that it grows in and to optimising a yield in that environment. However, yield is more complex than just flowering time. And next we're going to hear from Toby Barber about his work to uncover the genetic basis of yield and its components in winter wheat.
Hi guys, I'm Toby Barber. I'm a PhD student at NIAB and I'm looking at wheat yield and yield component traits. In wheat, yield is a complex trait which is governed by numerous developmental processes through the life cycle, which are in turn controlled by numerous genes and environmental interactions between these. In wheat, the three main yield component traits are number of ears per plant, the number of grains on those ears, and the weight of the grains. In my project, I'm using three different winter wheat populations which are derived from varieties which achieve their yield through these different components.
Yield in large-scale field trials or using fantastic new technologies, but there are also new and interesting ways which we can assess plant development. And next up, Toby's going to tell us a bit about some of the novel approaches he's been using during lockdown to understand more about how wheat plants develop.
I've also developed pairs of lines which differ only in small regions of the genome for in areas that control these individual component traits. During lockdown, I was wondering how I'm going to be able to phenotype all of my plants. So I came up with the idea of an exciting citizen science project. So I've shipped some of this seed off to volunteers at NIAB to grow at home in their gardens and collect measurements throughout the season. This data will then be coupled with in-field data I've collected over the past years, as well as bioinformatic analysis of genetic data to help to understand what controls these individual traits. Hello again!